Naruto as the Sage of Six Paths is a unique storyline I've not yet told. I mean, I've told the story about him being Hagoromo's reincarnation. I told that one before, but I've never really gone back to explore a world set in the land of ancestors. And while we're using the Asura name, as is only fitting, it's still our boy Naruto at the center of this, as well as our other boy Sasuke letting himself once more be consumed by hatred. I was enjoying writing this one so much that I just couldn't help but continue this one as fast as I could. So let's take a step back in time and enter the Amagi's world of Infinite Tsukuyomi, where any world and what if we wish to create may become reality. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. We've noticed that a lot of our viewers aren't actually subscribed to the channel, probably because YouTube is recommending you the kind of stuff you want to watch, namely our what ifs, but you might think that because you get them so often, you're already subscribed. If that's not the case, we would absolutely love it if you clicked that subscribe button and showed some support for the channel. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Thanks so much. Asura was walking back from the Mount of the Toad Sages. He had confidence in every stride. He had grown so strong in the time he'd been training. Perhaps this potential had always been there and he merely had not let it be realized. He'd been holding himself back. He'd been sheltered. He let himself be coddled for so long, and because of that, he'd been pacified. But Indra had opened his eyes to the truth. Their mother was... He stopped for a moment as he couldn't bring himself to say more. Their mother. He couldn't help but look back on every moment with her. Every time she allowed him to dive into the deepest recesses of her heart. Every time he had invited her into his. Was that all really a lie? He thought about her, but then he thought about her reaction to Haori and how she sent her to die. How selfish she had been. She was a murderer and a liar. Asura had been taken in by it. He had felt everything in her heart, and now what he experienced and what was reality was out of sync. His mother and who she was had become so skewed that he didn't know what was true anymore. The past he clinged on to, the love he knew he'd experienced, and the reality where they found themselves. The reality in which his mother was a vile leech, an enchantress to cast her spell over all. Asura simply sat on the fence of justified hatred and sorrowful love. But at the same time, he kept true to what he knew was right, and regardless of his feelings, he knew what she was doing, what she had done was wrong. And so he marched on toward fate. Until he could stop her, until he could understand, or until he perished. No matter the outcome, he hoped that the clouded thoughts in his head would be resolved. And deep down, he hoped that his mother would forsake this and return to him. Indra stood there by the porch, looking out against the dark skies and the god tree that loomed in the distant mountains like a lone sentry against the night. Their mother had gone there to tend to it. Indeed, he had pushed his mother to depression, but she yet fought to live. Her entire demeanor had changed though. She was hardly hiding anymore what she was doing. She had rounded up many of the villagers, manservants, maidservants, men, women, and even children, and had led them up to the god tree to serve it. In a way, even Indra was disgusted by this, not because of her actions, but because of her reactions. She had given up on all life on Earth just because Asura had supposedly committed suicide. His lip turned up into a snarl as he turned around and walked a little deeper into the castle. He found his mother's throne, and he situated himself sitting down upon it. There he slumped, his hand holding his head up as he thought about his plan, about where he was currently in the progression of it, and what was left to do. It was fine that she was feeding the villagers to it. All that meant was that soon they would produce a second chakra fruit, and when it was fully cultivated, he would pluck it from the tree and would devour it before her and gain power beyond her. He would gain the power to dethrone and kill her, absorbing her chakra. And when he did, he would search the stars for a new world to conquer. A new world to hold a god tree. He would become the strongest in the universe, and he would transcend into godhood. All he had to do was wait but a little while. Asura would return to his home, to the land of ancestors, and there he saw it desolate, with the only lights and life shown to be present being in the sparsely lit castle where he had once made his abode. Above him, the moon was full. It cast its blue light down upon the surface where Asura strode. Where is everyone? He asked to himself as he drew closer to the castle. Passing the large gate that led home, he stepped through the path in the garden up to the stairs where he ascended. It was not long until he saw Indra sitting slumped on the throne. Indra's face had been twisted in sorrow and despair. Asura walked up to him. "Brother, what's going on? Where is everyone?" Forcing a tear, Indra looked up. "I couldn't do it, Shuri. I couldn't stop her." Asura took a breath and prepared to ask the question that he was afraid he knew the answer to. "Stop her from what?" Indra sat forward and wiped his face. "Our mother took all of the villagers to the god tree. When you left the village, she knew the time would come to pass that you would return, and so she's trying to cultivate some fruit and grow stronger to stop you from defeating her and seizing the throne." Asura was startled. "My mother's really been doing this? But I thought she loved us. She's really preparing to kill me." Indra nodded. "We've been gaslit, Asura. She never loved us. She was cultivating us, too. When we were born, we received just a seedling of her chakra. And through our training and care, we grew, and the chakra we had began to increase to nearly the level she had upon eating the fruit. She cultivated us into chakra fruit. She'll soon devour us, and I fear she will not stop until the entirety of this world has been devoured and absorbed into her own power. She wants to become a god." Asura could hardly believe this. He thought he had known his mother, but her actions weren't making any sense. He had been in her heart. He was the only one who truly knew her deep down, or so he thought, because her actions right now flew in the face of everything he thought he knew. Asura nodded. "Then we must stop her at all costs. Come, brother, we'll stand against her." Indra stood and approached him in desperation. "You can't be serious. She's too powerful by now." Asura gripped his brother in love. "So long as we two stand together in unity, there's nothing we cannot do." He kissed Indra's cheek. He then stepped back and produced 2 shadow clones and allowed them to begin gathering nature energy. Indra looked at this. "What is this that you're doing?" Asura looked at him, his pure white Byakugan facing his brother. "I am preparing to absorb nature energy and enter sage mode." Indra nodded. "Sage energy, like the god tree does." Asura nodded. "It's the same concept." Indra, seeing this, had begun to wonder just how powerful Asura had become. He had learned to emulate the god tree's ability to absorb energy and transform it into chakra. He needed to keep an eye on this. He then took his brother by the hand and the two made their way up the mountain toward the god tree. They passed through the underbrush and scaled the mountain until they reached a cleft in the side of it. They passed through and into the open. There they saw Kaguya standing, facing the massive tree. As they spoke, a single fruit was appearing. It was a single fruit, but packed to the brim with chakra. Asura cried out, "Mother!" Kaguya stopped and for a moment did not turn to face them, as she was trying to process this sound, testing to see if it were reality or merely a memory eating away at her soul. She turned back and looked to see Asura. "Shuri!" She was startled and didn't know how to react. Tears began to form in her eyes as she rushed to him. She took her son in her arms and looked him over. The burn scars on the side of his face and on his hands. It was truly him. She began to cry harder as a smile came to her face. "I thought you were dead. I believed you had killed yourself." Asura shook his head, pushed her back. She was startled. "Asura!" He looked at her in disgust and then looked at the tree itself. "What have you done, mother?" She looked back. "I took the people and fed them to the tree." Asura grit his teeth. "I can't believe you. I thought you were dead," she cried out at him. "You know, maybe that doesn't excuse it, but I couldn't just..." She stopped. "I loved you to death, Asura. I would have killed for you, died for you." Asura then spoke. "You fed these people to the tree just so you could fight back against me. You knew I wasn't dead. You knew I was coming back to remove you from the throne, and so you fed these people to the tree to prepare to fight me." Kaguya was shocked. "No, I would never do that. I would never try to hurt you," she said. Asura in anger growled at her. "Then why did you kill Haori?" Kaguya was confused. Shuri, I never killed Haori. I thought you and she committed suicide because of me. I was going to give you my blessing, but you had already left, and by the time we found you, we thought you and she had died." Ashura's brow furrowed. "What, is that some lie?" Kaguya shook her head. "No, it was Indra who found your bodies. Indra was the one who told me the two of you had killed yourselves. Indra, you have to explain to your brother." Ashura looked to Indra. Indra began to laugh. "Indeed, I did tell her that. I showed her everything. I made her believe that you two had perished." Ashura was confused. "And Haori?" Indra looked to Ashura. "She is truly dead. I made sure of that myself." He stepped out into the moonlight before them. You see, I was the one who set all this up and manipulated you into believing everything that you do. In truth, I had hoped that by killing Haori that you might kill yourself, Asura. I even tried to convince you, but you resisted, so I had to backtrack and find another solution. I decided to blame it all on Mother and send you on some quest to dethrone her, and all the while had hoped that Mother would react in such a way that would grant me control. And while she also failed to kill herself, she was so lost in grief that she forgot herself. She lost what little humanity existed within her and fed all of the villagers to the god tree. Indra laughed again. This may not have been exactly my design, but it worked out in the end. The villagers have become one with the tree, and a new divine fruit has been created. And now there are but 2 loose ends left to clean up. Honestly, this worked out better than I could have hoped, because now I can absorb your chakra too. Ashura and Kaguya were surprised. Brother! Kaguya was shocked at this explanation. Indi? Indra looked back at them. Quit calling me that, he shouted. I am not Indi and I am not your brother. I will become a god and remake the world to be as I see fit. Kaguya rushed out to Indra. Indra, what has happened to you? Why are you doing this? Why do you hate me so? Why do you hate your brother? All we've ever done is love you. Indra backhanded her. Love? You've never once loved me. All you two have ever loved was each other. Ashura and Kaguya, the cutest mother and son ever. That's what the villagers called you. I was just Indra, the forgotten. I studied and trained and learned to mold my chakra in different ways, weaponize it so I could always protect you, protect Ashura. I grew strong for you. And anytime I wanted the same love Ashura got from you, you always turned away from me. Well now I'm turning away from you. If you don't love me, if the village doesn't love me, then I'll destroy it all. I'll destroy the whole world and remake it into a new world where I will be loved the most, where I'll be the favorite. I'll make a new brother and a new mom, and you two can just go to hell. He hovered up to the tree and took the fruit and bit into it, absorbing the chakra. Suddenly his 2 Mangekyou Sharingan mutated into Rinnegan. He hovered above them. I'll claim your chakra, mother. Brother. Ashura looked up at him. Indra! Kaguya held out her hand. Stop, Shuri. Ashura looked to his mother, and she looked to him. I did this to him. I'd always believed myself to be a good mother, to pay attention to each of my children. But now I've come to realize that I only ever showed you the love you deserved, and I shunned Indra. I turned him into this. Now I've got to save him. Please, let me deal with this. Ashura seemed reluctant, but he nodded and allowed her to step out. Kaguya walked out to meet him. Indi, I've failed you, she said as she stepped forward. I never saw you for who you truly were. I only ever compared you to your brother, and that was unfair. If I could go back now, I would ensure to never treat you like that again, but time doesn't work like that. She held out her hand. All I can do is offer you the love you always deserved now. Please, come down to me and take my hand. I love you. Indra hovered above and growled. If you love me, then die. He formed about 12 chakra rods and fired them down at her. Ashura quickly stepped in the way and utilized the 8 trigrams palm rotation to defend Kaguya. He knocked away the chakra rods. How dare you attempt to kill our mother? Indra laughed. Hypocritical of you, I dare say. Did you not come here to kill her yourself? The shoe only stinks when it's on the other foot. Ashura stopped for a moment and looked back. I never intended to kill our mother. I wanted to stop her, yes, but I would never kill her. I would have saved her. He looked forward. I would have saved her, just as I'm going to save you too. He rushed forward with his Sage Mode activated. Indra would fire down upon him chakra rod after chakra rod. Some Ashura could dodge and others he would have to block. He managed to push through, and the moment he jumped into the air to strike Indra, Indra utilized the Diva Path to push Ashura back and away. Ashura skid to a stop. Kaguya came to him and helped him up. Don't worry, I'm with you. She stood there and opened her third eye, her Rinne Sharingan. It was this eye from which you were born, Indra. With this eye, I held a vision that you would one day be a great warrior. I see now that it was a prophecy fulfilled, but I do so wish that it had not. I would not have sacrificed you for strength. Indra smirked. It's so easy to say that now that you realize that you can't beat me. Kaguya rushed forward. With her Rinne Sharingan, she tapped into her Diva Path to push against Indra's Diva Path, just to get up and close to him. They wrestled for a moment in the air as their bodies hit the ground. Ashura rushed in, his Byakugan active. This was the one thing he had on Indra. Indra did not possess the Byakugan like he did. Instead, Indra possessed the Sharingan, which could not see Tenketsu. Ashura had trained in such a way as to make up for Indra's shortcomings when he thought that their mother would be the only one they would fight. Now his techniques were capable of allowing him to strike where Indra was weakest. You should have killed me when you had the chance, Asura shouted as he rushed in with his palm out, ready to strike the Tenketsu on Indra's body and pacify him before he could hurt anyone else. Indra's Rinnegan quickly passed between Kaguya, Asura, and back again, attempting to see them both at the same time. The one benefit his Sharingan had lost over the Byakugan his brother had been born with. He kicked Kaguya back powerfully and spun under Ashura's punch before activating the Ashura path, which Indra believed to be finally named, considering that it was about to kill his brother. A large metal blade protruded from his arm and stabbed Ashura in the stomach. Ashura was struck, and he just stood there silently for a moment as blood dripped from his mouth. He looked down at his brother's sneer, a satisfied smile playing on his lips as he pulled the blade back and switched to the Diva path to push Ashura away. Ashura rolled. He began to bleed. Kaguya stood and ran over to him. "Shuri!" Indra crossed his arms as he watched. "As you can see, mother, I was always the superior son. Eldest by a few minutes, I was always a step ahead of him, no matter what." Kaguya knelt down to see blood pouring from the wound. "Shuri!" she cried out as she held him in her arms. Ashura looked up. Mother, She rubbed his face. "Don't try to speak. Save your strength. I'll heal you." She began attempting to heal him, but it was too late. He was slipping away. In one moment, he curled up in her arms as he had when he was but a child. She recalled that this had been his reaction when Indra had burned him, and now that he was dying, it was once more this reaction. She cradled her son and held him close. She continued trying to heal him. He looked up. "Mom, I am upset at you." She looked down on him and nodded. He continued. "You killed so many people, just because of me?" She shook her head. "No, I killed them to protect you. And when I thought you died, I knew I couldn't lose Indra too. So I began cultivating a fruit. I never told you about my clan. They come from the heavens, and I've made enemies of them. They'll come one day soon. I didn't want to lose you to them, even if I had to become a devil." He smiled softly. "There are some things we can't change, Mom. Even if it means letting go, we must protect this world. Our people. It's why I was born. I protect people and love them. You helped me learn that. I just wish I could have saved Indra too." Ashura looked down, feeling like a failure. He had always felt like a failure, and now it had all come full circle. He was a failure. He had always failed in everything he did, and he was failing again now. Slowly, his life ebbed away. Kaguya kept holding him. Indra looked down on them as he hovered in the sky. Touching. Kaguya looked back at him. Indra's judging gaze was cast down upon her like some god viewing an unworthy mortal. "If that had been me, would you have cried?" "I would have died for you," she cried out to Indra. She looked down at Ashura. "I still would, and I will." She put her hand on Ashura's cheek and closed her eyes. She began to glow as color returned to Ashura's face. Ashura opened his eyes. "Huh?" Kaguya smiled, seeing him return to life. She sat him up. Ashura looked at her. Mother, how am I alive?" She smiled as her body began to fade to dust. "A life for a life. The power of the outer path." Ashura was shocked. He held her as she began to fade away. "Why did you do this?" Kaguya looked at him as she lay in his arms. "Because it's what I deserve. I sacrificed so much for my own sake that it's time I sacrifice for someone else." As she lay there in his arms, her eyes closed and she took a deep breath. "Shuri, you're the only one who can save Indra. I failed him, but you can redeem him. You can succeed where I failed. I've never seen a heart like yours. Let it guide you, give you strength, and where your strength fails, let mine empower you." She touched her hand to his cheek, and there she passed her chakra into Ashura. He felt a sudden burst of energy that seemed to blow his hair back like a gale-force wind. Kaguya smiled. "I believe in you, Ashura." She then faded into the light that passed back to the stars from which she came. Ashura sat there. Indra looked down on him. "Damn it. That chakra is mine. You will give it to me." He rushed down at him. Ashura stood and with a powerful release of pressure knocked Indra back. Indra skid across the ground, keeping his balance. He looked into his brother's eyes. Ashura looked up. His Byakugan had themselves mutated through the power of Six Paths chakra. His eyes had turned to Tenseigan, the Six Paths variant of the Byakugan, the rival of the Rinnegan. But further still, in the center of his head, a single red Rinne Sharingan appeared. Ashura suddenly transformed, a powerful cyan-colored chakra coating his body, as if his entire being had been composed of stardust. He lifted into the air, as about his body multiple glowing truth-seeking orbs appeared, floating. He rushed forward toward Indra, striking him in the jaw, knocking him into the stone. Asura was on him in a minute. Indra lifted his hand to release a Diva Path Almighty Push, but Asura utilized his Tenseigan's gravity control to cancel out this Almighty Push. As strong as the Rinnegan was, the Tenseigan had one thing on it. While it lacked all of the fancy paths, it possessed gravity control strong enough that even a moon might be shattered under its pull. That was stronger than any Rinnegan could do alone. He smashed into Indra again, knocking him through the rock. Indra shot up into the sky, out of the smoke clouds like a rocket. Once he was in the air, he shook his head and looked down into the clouds of dust, trying to scan for Asura. Sadly, his Rinnegan could not see through gases like this. Asura was having no issues looking at him through his Tenseigan. The Tenseigan, being an evolved form of the Byakugan, retained all of its previous abilities, and among these was X-ray vision. The golden lotuses in the blue irises of his Tenseigan glowed as he viewed Indra from below. Indra began to blindly fire black chakra rods down at Asura from above. The shots all missed their mark by what seemed like a country mile. Asura suddenly shot up into the sky and grabbed Indra by the leg and threw him down to the ground. Indra struck the earth and lay there for a moment as Asura came down. Indra stood, gripping his left shoulder as it felt like it had been pulled out of socket. Asura stepped closer, and once he was in range, he lowered his stance. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. He suddenly rushed at Indra. 2 palms, 4 palms, 8 palms. He began to strike out quickly at the Tenketsu that he witnessed with his Tenseigan. He was hoping to incapacitate Indra so that he could end the battle without blood. 16 palms, 32 palms, 64 palms. He shouted as his striking speed doubled with every round. Finally, he struck Indra and knocked him back into the tree. Indra lay against the tree, barely able to move as many of his Tenketsu were closed, limiting the flow of chakra. He could only weakly move his fingers and toes. Anything beyond that was too taxing. How was this possible? How could the weak child Asura surpass his brother? The Rinnegan was a superior dojutsu compared to the Tenseigan. It had more abilities, more powers, and yet he was losing. Why? As if he was reading his mind, Asura spoke. Do you know why you lose? You lose because you're not using your dojutsu to its fullest potential. But further, it's because I want it more. I want to save you. You want to kill me, or so you say, but I want to save you. And even if I have to die to bring you back from this darkness, I will. As if blocking out anything that Asura had said, Indra scoffed. Not using my dojutsu to its fullest potential, you say? Perhaps I should rectify that. Suddenly, from his back, multiple chakra chains shot out. They wrapped around the tree and began to pull it into him. Asura stood there on guard, watching. Indra pulled it in and suddenly felt another consciousness. A beast. It roared in his mind, as powerful as nature itself. Indra screamed in agony as he felt his psyche being ripped apart by instinct. The instinct to kill and destroy. Too much! It's too much power! He shouted. I'm losing control! He grabbed his head and leaned forward. It felt like he was being dragged into a chasm with no way out, nothing to grip to slow himself down. Suddenly, he remembered the throne. He remembered his mother and his brother. He remembered all of the good times they had together, every hug he received from either of them. He knew that he would recreate the world. He would make a world where that would come to pass again, where he would be the favorite, where a new version of Kaguya and Asura would live, each one offering him the love he deserved. A world where Haori had chosen him instead. A world where he got to sit on his mother's lap all the time and share her bed. A world where Asura was there every time he skinned his knee playing. Every time he was sure he broke his shins while practicing Muay Thai. A world of love only for him. And it was that desire, that drive, that pulled him back from the depths. He crawled back up with every ounce of strength that he had, dragging the Ten Tails with him. This was the world he wanted, and it was the world that he would make. Pulling it up, he absorbed the Ten Tails into himself. In reality, Asura was watching this battle unfold, and suddenly Indra stood up. Nothing but severed roots where the Ten Tails had once been. Indra looked to his brother, both of his Rinnegan active and a third eye awakening in his forehead. A Rinne Sharingan, just as Asura had. Indra would rush at Asura at breakneck speeds, striking his brother with enough force that the air pressure around them would suddenly change. Asura was struck so hard that he hit the stone fast enough to break the sound barrier. He sat there in the stone struggling to breathe. He couldn't move. He was just in utter shock. The pain had yet to even catch up. Looking through the dust, he saw Indra casually walking towards him. Asura wiped his lip of the saliva that had dripped out while he tried to catch his breath. Asura stepped out of the dust. When he did, Indra rushed at him and tried to strike again. Asura caught the fist. They pushed so hard against each other that the ground below their feet began to shatter under the pressure. Asura fell to one knee as Indra pressed harder. He looked to his brother and began to wonder what his current weakness must be. He realized what he had to do. He got into position as Indra came at him. As Indra struck out at Asura, Indra ducked under the attack and put his palm into his stomach. This stopped Indra in his tracks. Asura stood and gripped Indra by the back of his neck and pulled his head in to touch the forehead of Asura. And in that moment, both were transported into the mindscape. Indra looked around at this place and understood. You couldn't beat me physically, so now you're planning to attack my soul. How pitiful. Asura looked at him silently for a moment and then spoke. You know, I've never been here before, he said as he looked around. I've never once been in your heart before. Indra's brow furrowed as he listened silently. Asura looked around as he stepped about. This place it's so empty. Why is it so empty? Because there was nothing worth putting in it, Indra said. Asura looked at what appeared to be physical manifestations of emotional scars within the center of Indra's being. He touched it and witnessed a memory of murder, a memory of two cherished friends being slaughtered for the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Don't touch that, Indra shouted at him. Asura pulled away. You killed them? You killed your friends for power. Indra then spoke. They meant nothing to me. They never meant anything. It's why I can so easily cast them aside. If they meant nothing, then why do you have their memory so lovingly enshrined in your heart? Why did your Mangekyo Sharingan awaken from their deaths? I think you cared a lot more than you say you did. I want you to stop messing around in here. Leave me alone. Asura took one look back at Indra and stepped toward him. You know, I always wanted in here. I always wanted into your heart, but I could never make it past the first layer. You were always so prickly. He walked to Indra. Let me in. Indra shook his head. No, I don't want you in here. You never deserved it. You never deserved to be in here. If Mom wasn't deserving of it, then how could you ever be? Asura looked into his brother's eyes. Because I love you. Indra grit his teeth. You only love me now that I'm stronger than you and can kill you. Asura looked down at his scarred hand. You could always kill me. He looked back up. All I ever wanted was to be let into your heart. Mama let me in, so I stayed close with her. Why won't you let me in? Because I'm scared, Indra shouted. He fell to his knees, and in that moment, the two of them were no older than 7. I'm scared, Asura. I don't want you to come in. Asura knelt down next to him. Why? Indra wiped his eyes. Because I'm really weak inside. I gotta be the strong one. That's all I am. That's all I can be. This is the only thing that I can do better than you. I don't want to show anyone how I really feel. I don't want to be obsolete. I don't want to be forgotten. Asura hugged him. Indra, I don't care if you're weak. Mama didn't care if you were weak. I was weak. I always looked up to you, and I still do. You're my brother. I love you. Indra cried on his shoulder. Why did Mom have to love you more? Why couldn't she love me, too? I always wanted to feel good enough for her, and I was never good enough. Asura held him close. You were always good enough, another voice said. Indra opened his eyes to see Kaguya. Her chakra within Asura had given her a conduit with which to conduct her spirit. It came to the two children and knelt down, hugging them. I always loved you, Asura. You were always so guarded. I couldn't get into your heart. I wanted so badly to love you just as I loved Asura, but you wouldn't let me. You wouldn't let either of us. Indra cried openly, his eyes overflowing with tears. I had to be strong. I read your diary. I knew the Otsutsuki were coming. I wanted to be strong enough to protect you. She kissed his head. I was so unfair to you, but I love you so much. You're my precious child. I could never stop loving you. I wanted to be in your heart just like Asura. I didn't care if you were weak. I didn't care if your entire persona was a facade. I knew my little boy. I knew who you were, but I dared not force myself in. I wanted you to let me in, but it seems I didn't encourage you enough, and for that, I'm sorry. Indra hugged them both. Mama, I'm sorry I killed you. I'm sorry I got you killed. She kissed his head. I told you I would die for you. Only Asura could enter your heart. I could not. I just wanted you to be happy, even if I had to die. Indra's grip on Asura grew tired. I'm sorry I killed your love, Asura. I was so jealous of you. I wanted her. I wanted her to love me. But when she chose you, Asura rubbed the back of his head. It's okay, Indra. I know why you did it. They embraced once more. Slowly, Asura pulled away. I'll always love you, Indra. And in that moment, they were back on the battlefield. Asura was holding Indra as they both sat on their knees. Indra was crying into his brother's arms. Asura stroked his brother's back. Shh, it's okay. No need to cry. It's okay. After a moment, Indra pulled back a little and wiped his eyes. No, It's not okay. I unfairly killed so many people because of my own selfishness. I'm so sorry. Asura touched his head to Indra's. It's okay. I forgive you. Indra shook his head. But I can't forgive myself. I have to make this right. Asura looked at him curiously. Indra then put his hand to Ashura's chest and transferred the 10 tails to him. I've got to make this right. Asura shook his head. You don't need to do this. Indra looked to his brother and smiled. I do. I want to. I want to let you into my heart. I want to expose my true feelings for everyone else, but they can't see if they're dead. He put his hands together and used samsara of heavenly life to bring back those who had perished at his own hands. Those killed by the 10 tails, he brought them back to life. They all appeared in that field as Indra fell forward into Ashura's arms. They gathered around the two as Asura held him. Indra looked up. I don't need to remake the world anymore. I already have what I want the most. I have the love I wanted so much. He rested his head against Ashura's chest. Thank you, Asura. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would without a second thought. I hope in the future I can be your brother again. And if so, I will be sure not to close my heart to you. I love you. And with that, Indra passed away in Ashura's arms. Asura cried bitter tears for his brother. Haori knelt down next to them and put her hand on Indra while looking to Asura. She kissed him. From there, Asura began to lead the people forward in love and peace. He taught them how to use their chakra to connect with others and spread their love from person to person. Eventually, Asura married Haori and produced 2 sons. He named them Hagoromo and Hamada. Hagoromo inherited the same Sharingan as Indra, and Hamada inherited the same eyes as Asura. He led them both to be strong and wise, but above all, caring. And he was sure to give each child ample amounts of love so neither felt left out. As time passed, however, and Asura grew close to death, he utilized the 6 paths technique, creation of all things, to split the 10 tails into 9 separate beasts. And as Asura perished, he passed his title of Sage of 6 Paths down to his sons, both of whom would be known as the Sage of 6 Paths. They would lead the future, but as Ashura's bloodline became diluted, the people began to return to the natural state of mankind, which is to say, war. And so the Warring States period would arise, but not without those who would stand together. The Uchiha clan and the Senju clan stuck close, and it was on one particular day that 2 boys would meet by the river. Hashirama Senju would look up and see another boy there with a smile. The boy would extend his hand. Hi there, I'm Madara. And I think that this is a good place to end it. In fact, this little what if could actually spawn another what if entirely. I was thinking, what if there was no curse of hatred? Wouldn't that be a wonderful story? If you'd like to see it, please let me know in the comments below, and if enough people want it and this video gets enough views, I might just consider making it. Anyway, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, peace.
Did you enjoy our video? Well then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.